everyone. My name is Judy Winfield, and I'm with Listen, Love, Pray Foundation. And I'm going to be talking this evening on self-care. And I think it's always good to kind of understand what it is we're talking about when we go to the definition of self-care. So self-care, what is it? Self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. And it's also the practice to improve one's own well-being and happiness during periods of stress. Self-care is an action and a decision we make for ourselves. It's something we have control over. We can make a decision to practice self-care, good self-care. The way we practice self-care and choose to do self-care often comes and has its roots in the way that we think about ourselves. And that's called self-worth. Understanding our self-worth then leads to how we do or do not practice self-care. Recently, Ed Taylor, who is a member of Listen, Love, Pray, and specifically the recovery team, spoke about self-worth with the men at the inside the Changed Life program at the Frederick Rescue Mission. And Ed shared a lot of things, and there were three main things that he touched upon that I want to share first when it comes to self-worth. Self-worth can come from three separate sources. We want to seek validation. We want to figure out who it is we are, and that's our self-worth. That's what self-worth is understanding who we are. And we seek that sometimes through the opinions of other people. We depend upon others to kind of define who we are. And that can be done in several different ways. Sometimes it starts at the very beginning in childhood. Sometimes it's the words that are spoken to us or over us, the things that we hear and that we believe to be as truth, and then that becomes part of our self-worth and also our identity. That's a really tricky situation to be in, because when we are depending on someone else to provide validation for us and to tell us who we are, that's really based on another human being. And it's a very emotional, when someone that we know and that we're depending on to help define us, we might be feeling really good because they're saying good things. Perhaps they're doing good things to you and for you. And you're kind of like on a roller coaster. You're riding that first big hill. You're going up and up and up every time they say something or do something that's positive and that reinforces you. Sometimes we rest for a really long time at the top of that hill. However, things then, because people are human, sometimes then get us on a downward trend on that roller coaster hill. They might stop saying kind things to us. They might just turn away from us and not be our friend anymore. And that then gets us to where we are feeling down. Our self-worth and our self-esteem could then start to plummet. It's an emotional roller coaster of sorts. There's lots of ups and lots of downs. The second source of self-worth comes from inside of us. Each one of us are capable of setting a goal. We work to achieve that goal. We figure out the steps we want to take. We figure out what the next right decision is. And we find ourselves focused and being very mindful about achieving that goal. However, we can get to a point in life that something happens. And here we are again on another emotional roller coaster. When we are on that upward trend of setting the goal, where we are making the decisions, we're starting to see things happen. We have successes. We're going up, 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 up. We might stay at the top for a while, and then sometimes we then start to go down. And that then changes the way we feel. We no longer feel perhaps like we're in control, that our goal now is eluding us, that we have. Sometimes we might feel like we are a failure, like we just screwed up. And that negative self-talk can begin at that time as well. Perhaps those things that were said to you as a child or spoken to you that weren't so kind start to then replay within your mind on a more frequent basis. And once again, there's an emotional roller coaster. The way we practice self-care is rooted in the way we think about ourselves. Our true self-worth comes from God. Our true self-worth comes from God. We need to understand how God made us. We need to know this deep within our soul, within our spirit, and within our hearts. Knowing that helps us with our self-worth. And it starts way back in the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, especially verse 27. This is what God says. He says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, both male and female. Each one of us are made in God's image. That is truth. Jesus also confirms our identity and self-worth in John 1, verse 12. But to all who accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. Through Jesus, we are a child of God. Each one of us is a child of God, wholly loved by God. I want to go back to that definition one more time. Self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health, and it's the practice to improve one's own well-being and happiness during a time of stress. Certainly, the last 16 months, 18 months almost, have been very stressful. The global pandemic has changed us, and we've faced challenges that we never had to face before. And that sometimes can bring on new stresses for us. I can remember when I think about the word stress, I think about my kids. I think about my two boys. Back in the day, they had a Nintendo game system. I think they also had a GameCube. And back then, they were little cartridges. And you would insert that cartridge into the player, I guess, into the unit, and then they could play their game. Well, when that Nintendo cartridge did not quite work properly, or perhaps it stopped working in the middle of a game, boy, did my kids feel stress. How did I know this? I heard them. Oh my, what's going on now? Not again. This silly game, I'm mad. They then kind of figured out that if they pulled the cartridge out, they would turn it around, and they would blow on it. They would blow on it. And I don't know why they did that. Perhaps one of their friends told them that's what you do. And then they would reinsert it into the game, into the player. And sometimes it worked. Their game resumed and all was well. Their stress was relieved and the game was restored. The Dalai Lama is quoted as saying, if you feel burnout settling in, if you feel demoralized and exhausted, it is best for the sake of everyone to withdraw and restore yourself. Making time to withdraw, to take time apart, and getting restored is a good way to practice self-care. Jesus speaks to this in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. This is what Jesus says. Come to me, all who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke fits perfectly, and the burden I give you is light. I like the words, I will give you rest. What does that mean, that word rest in this sense? What rest is Jesus talking about? Why is his rest different from worldly types of rest? Laying down and taking a nap, resting by watching something on Netflix, any kind of thing, perhaps going out and taking a walk. Those are other things that are ways that we find rest. Joshua, back to the Old Testament, in chapter 1, tells us more about this particular kind of rest. Starts with verse 1. It's telling a story. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you, Joshua, to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I am giving them. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set your foot, you will be on land I have given you, from the Negev wilderness to the south, to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all of the land of the Hittites. It is your land. No one will be able to stand against you as long as I live for you. For I will be with you as I was with Moses. I, God, will not fail you or abandon you. He then goes on to say in verse 6, be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess the land I swore to give your ancestors. Be strong and very courageous. He says it twice. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night, so you will be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command. Here it is again. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. God spoke those words to Joshua. Joshua then has all of this information, and he's there with thousands of people. He's there with people waiting to go into the promised land that God promised them. Joshua pulled together all of the men in charge, the command of Israel. It starts with verse 10. Joshua then commanded the officers of Israel. He's talking to them, and he says, go through the camp and tell the people to get their provisions ready. Tell them to get ready. In 3 days, you will cross the Jordan River and take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Then Joshua called together all the tribes, the tribe of Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. He said to them, remember what Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. The Lord your God is giving you a place of rest. The Lord your God is giving you a place of rest. Biblical rest is described in verse 5. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. That is biblical rest. Rest that comes from the Bible comes from remembering. It comes from remembering what God said. God is with you. God will not fail you. God will not abandon you. We can find rest in God's promises. that kind of rest gives us hope. Now going back to self-care. Self-care sometimes for us can come, for some people, comes very easily. You know, they do things that they take time out. They have a certain routine that they practice, whether that's exercising, the way they eat, the way they meditate or do yoga. They've got things that help them with their self-worth, and they help them to take good self-care of themselves. Sometimes self-care is difficult. Sometimes we're almost like on a roller coaster again. Sometimes we resolve to start a new form of self-care. You know, maybe it is, I'm going to take a 10-minute walk every day. And we're good with that. And we're going up. And then something can stop us. You know, something happens in our lives that then pull us away. We're no longer focused on that self-care habit that we tried to put into place. There is good news. It's never too late to begin. It's never too late to begin good self-care. Choosing to be here tonight, listening to this message, is a way of practicing self-care. Good for you. Way to go. You're here. You chose to be here, and to learn and to learn what self-care is. You know, Listen, Love, Pray offers several opportunities for you to learn more and move forward with self-care. Tonight is an example. We offer continuing education classes and other things that we educate people on. Every Tuesday evening, we do gather at 7 p.m. for a healing prayer service, if it's not a special continuing education. Attendance of those generally is on Zoom, and we are planning to get back into person. You know, starting, we've already had one, and we will continue to do that as time goes forward. Lucinda touched at the very beginning, before this talk started, on scheduling a healing prayer session. You know, a healing prayer session is a time where we reserve an opportunity to go deeper into a specific issue or issues in a private, confidential prayer setting. That's another way to practice good self-care. You know what? We are starting a new a new book study. It's called Think and Eat Yourself Smart by Dr. Caroline Leaf. We start this next month. Dr. Leaf is get this, cognitive neuroscientist, and she's a Christian. She has a way in her books of weaving scripture and her knowledge of the way that the brain works and thinks to help us then rewire the way we think. And this specifically is going to talk about thinking and eating yourself smart, not just in the food choices you make, but almost also in a global way, how the food supply within the world could be impacting the way that we eat, and as the world as a whole. In September, we're going to resume our monthly visits to Paradise Stables. Paradise Stables is a beautiful horse farm. It's a boarding horse farm here in Mount Airy, and they have a program, and they have graciously invited Listen, Love, Pray to take part. I have gone. It's like a 2-hour time where you're spending time grooming a horse, getting to know the horse, you lead the horse, and it is just a time of refreshing in a way to be in service to something that took my mind off of my troubles and my, the things that were going on in my own world at the time. So that will resume in September. We also have a YouTube presence. We have our own channel, and there are over 160 talks just like this that have been recorded. Talks about learning how to pray for others, healing prayer, There's also testimonies. People have been gracious in sharing their testimony, things that they have experienced in times of healing prayer, or any other thing of how they've seen God work in their lives. So check out those too to learn more about that. And hot off the presses, save the date. Our next Listen, Love, Pray weekend retreat is March 4, 5, and 6, 2022. So go ahead and perhaps write that down. Details will follow in the few months to come. I hope that you have found encouragement and perhaps a new understanding when it comes to how self-care and self-worth are tied. Thank you.